Welcome to Three Devs and a Maybe, the podcast series for beginner web developers and general web enthusiasts. Now, introducing your show hosts, Michael Budd, Fraser Hart, Lewis Gaines, and Ed Mann.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Three Devs and a Maybe. My name's Ed Mann. Today we're very lucky to be joined yet again by a good friend of the show, Joe Watkins. How you doing, Joe?
Hi everyone. Hi Ed.
How's it going, man?
Good, yeah.
It sounds like you've been a very busy person recently. I've been looking through all your GitHub stuff and everything, and there's a couple of really interesting projects that you've been working on. But firstly, how is PHP 7.1 going? RC4's out, I've seen.
Yeah, we're like in the last couple of RCs now, so pretty close to. I don't really know why we keep having RCs, to be honest. The idea is with an RC is you if you put out an RC and then there's no bugs found, that's the release. Yeah, it's a release candidate. So that's if there's no bugs found, then that's the release. But we don't seem to do that. We just have RCs over and over again until we're happy that we've had a bunch of RCs.
Yeah, as long as you've hit the quota of at least 4 RCs, then hopefully that...
It seems to be 6. It seems to be 6 seems to be what we're talking about doing, but I'm not really sure why. But typically, you would tag an RC, package it, put it out to QA people. If no bad stuff comes back from your people, your QA team or people, that's the thing that you release. You release it as whatever it's meant to be, an alpha or a beta or whatever. We don't do that. We have alphas and then betas and then RCs until we're kind of sure that we've got some stability, and then that's what we release.
But it is on the slowly but surely coming together then.
Yeah, it's another today's last but one's the penultimate one, so only another couple of weeks and it should be generally available.
Brilliant. And how have you found the experience?
Well, I mean, we've only really just started. I mean, the thing lasts for years. I mean, at the moment it's okay, but it lasts for years. So, ask me in a year.
And has there already work been done, to start off with 7.1.2, or 7.2?
Yeah, that's master right now. Stuff that's just can't go in 7.1 that's still going in is going into master at the moment, but there's not much. Mostly just talk at the moment about what's going to go in 7.2. There's a few little bits, but nothing. So
has there been a lot of activity on RFCs at the moment, or has it really just been all hands on deck with getting 7.1 out?
No, the last couple of weeks it's been quite quiet, actually, thankfully. I think it's kind of understood that there's not really much, there's no sense in tying everyone up with lots of RCs. I mean, there's a couple being discussed, but nothing being rushed in. So yeah, it's pretty calm at the moment.
Are you currently working on any RFCs?
RFCs, no.
You're so busy with all of this stuff instead. Yes,
I'm quite busy, yeah.
And then also another thing that you're working on currently is a UI library. It's always interesting looking through your GitHub, Joe, because you always have some it's sometimes you're I'm thinking, I wonder what Joe's up to. And you're very good at kind of publicly showing that this is what I'm doing. And yeah, one of the things was kind of making a wrapper around libui, providing an interface for it in PHP. And doing some really interesting things. I've noticed on Twitter, you did some kind of space, kind of star, examples and things like that, and showing how you would use it in PHP 7. I'm just wondering, kind of how that came about. Is it a work thing? Is it just a hobby thing?
Oh no, I just saw it on GitHub and I thought, oh, that looks good. We'll have that. So yeah, we've got that.
That's brilliant. And have you got any kind of ideas what you want to use it for? Is it really just you want to provide the infrastructure for other people to kind of come about?
Yeah, I'm not really the kind of person who does graphic things. I'm really bad at just the basics of graphic design, like choosing colours and things. So I don't really do that kind of stuff. But I am interested in, expanding the horizons of PHP, and this definitely does that. So
definitely. Because, is there any other, kind of libraries out available yet? Or is this, the first one that can do these things?
Well, there used to be PHP GTK. That wasn't really a library. That was more of a modified PHP runtime with its own... it came with about 40 extensions and its own website and everything. And it was a huge project because GTK is really complicated and old as well. And the approach to writing libraries back then was different. It was just let's write a thin wrapper around this thing so that we can use it. It wasn't, let's take this thing, GTK, and make a an API that our target audience would understand. So I don't really think it got much use. I mean, nowadays there's a couple. There's like Glut ones and Cairo and things, but none of them are, I don't want to say none of them are any good, but none of them are really any good. None of them are feature complete, nor is this one actually, because libui isn't feature complete, but it does have the kind of API that you would understand from HTML5, that hopefully most people would understand from HTML5.
Things like swing, like in Java world, you get if you understood that, you'd understand this.
I mean, yeah. I mean, if you understand, yes, swing or you know, all the controls will look familiar to anyone who's used any
GUI kind of creation.
Yeah. But I mean, specifically, the drawing stuff is really quite similar to how it is on canvases. So, and it's a bit more focused and a bit more. There's no like fluff at the moment. I mean, it's quite tidy and neat. So it seemed like a good. And also, it does native interfaces on each operating system that it supports.
That's a huge win, isn't it? That really is a great win.
Because GTK doesn't look nice anywhere but Linux, really, and people on Mac want their stuff to look like it belongs on a Mac, and people on Windows, same. So, yeah, that is a huge win.
You've got a GUI app, haven't you, for the PHP Debug stuff that you did? I remember you made a Java app or something for it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, are you hoping like maybe to move that over to this then, like as one of the first things to go over to it, or are you happy leaving that as Java? Maybe
we could, but I mean, it doesn't really win as anything because PHP Debug hasn't got much of a very good API for PHP scripts. I mean, it can set breakpoints and stuff, but it doesn't really win as anything. But I mean, I don't really have any ideas, but
you have the mind like to know how to do this bit. So this is the hard bit to actually get this in, and then let people.
Well, the hard bit is actually libui. I mean, it's basically one guy's written that. Most of the kudos goes to him, really. Yeah, it's just about expanding the horizons, and other people are going to come up with stuff that I can't imagine. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
It's really interesting. I mean, because how did you find out about libui then? Do you just kind of look around, seeing the different
Yeah. I look at trending stuff on GitHub and things.
And so one guy has made this whole library that unifies dealing with Windows, Mac, and Linux.
I mean, he's done it in the open, so he's done it with contributions. But yeah, basically, it is basically one guy.
That is pretty damn impressive.
Yeah. Actually, I should qualify that it might not be one guy. They do all their commits as one person, but maybe they are more than one person.
Right, yeah.
I get the feeling, actually, that it's one guy, because I talked to them in IRC. I think it's one guy. Anyway, sorry, what were you saying there?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, how much more, have you been able to cover the whole API now?
There's a bit to do with font metrics. I mean, the vast majority of it, yeah. There's none of it that's out of bounds. And it's still in development, so at the moment, you just get 2D canvases, but there's talk of an OpenGL. So yeah, 3D.
The possibilities are endless there, aren't they? That's crazy.
And obviously, I saw it, and I've thought about this stuff before with GTK and also with an old extension called Wimbinder. But the problem is that when you go into event handlers to draw a bit of a screen, you don't have time and resources to waste. The drawing code in your browser or whatever is extremely efficient code. It is compiled first of all, and then it's just in time optimized, and it couldn't be more efficient. That's why your browser draws the screen so fast. So in PHP 5, just calling a function just allocates memory and it does things that are just not acceptable. But in PHP 7, it doesn't. So it is now feasible to ask it to, repeatedly execute the same thing in event handlers and not give a crappy experience, basically. So that's why it became a good idea for PHP 7. But I won't be doing anything to make it work with PHP 5. We just focus on going forward.
No, I mean, with 7.1 coming out now, you're going to have another release. You've got a release behind you of 7. So,
yeah,
the weight behind it's getting bigger and people should move over.
Yeah.
There's one off RFC. I don't know, mind if you mind talking about it. I don't know if you've seen it, actually. You probably have. It's been out for probably about a month now. Deprecating Peckle and Pear and replacing it with Composer and Pickle.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, well, what are your thoughts? Because I remember we spoke about Pickle a while ago, moving over to that.
Well, I mean, my thoughts on it are that I don't know if it's finished, but Davey seems to think it's worth moving forward with, so maybe I'm wrong. A lot of the problems that we've got with PECL aren't solved by changing the name of the command and the language it's written in or whatever, or the library it uses or whatever. So I'd like to see some attention given to those problems, really.
So what kind of problems, like, off the top of your head, can you think that are causing?
Well, I mean, generally, PECL is not a useful command for users who haven't got root access because you can't install extensions. So
yeah, you can't just have userland extensions that you use in a particular project. Like similar, like a composer install can do that wherever.
Yeah, web servers are usually configured with an extension directory, and you can't write extensions to that. So maybe there's going to be some changes so that PHP can load modules from or can ignore extension directories, or you can actually do that, but it's just a matter of configuration. I mean, how do you let people configure that, and how do you let in a shared hosting environment, which is what we're talking about, really. How do you let lots of people load different versions of the same extension?
Safely and securely.
I mean, you can't. You actually, just to be clear, you actually can't do that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of the problems still exist, and I'd like a new tool that's actually going to be maintained, because Pair really isn't. So it's good to sort of piggyback off the work that Composer gets, but on the other hand, if we're not solving any problems, we're not solving any problems.
No, as you say, there's maybe foundational problems that need to be solved.
Yeah, or just not I mean, there's no real way to solve.
Yeah, in the shared hosting environment. Yeah.
Or just admit that look, we want to move forward, and this is what we're going to do. And if it means that in shared hosting it's a bit more difficult for you, then I mean, we can't make compromises forever. The language is the whole internet is not on shared hosting anymore. It's not 1995 anymore.
No, VPSs rule the world now.
So we've got to focus on getting running on the infrastructure where people actually deploy their apps, which is on the cloud and on big data center infrastructure. So there's no good reason to keep holding on to, but we've got to work on shared hosting as a real justification for doing bad stuff, or leaving out good stuff like this, getting a nicely maintained tooling. There's no real movement on anything other than the tooling, then I'm not really sure if we're going forward.
No, that's really interesting. And another RFC actually is this is quite a nice one, it's traits with interfaces. So being able to implement an interface in a trait, and then being able to mix that in. And then obviously the class that implements that gets that, a class that implements the trait or uses the trait, then gets the interface as well.
I'll just have a quick look at the RFC. If I remember, it does a weird thing. Oh, yeah. If the class, no, I think it's changed actually. Before it was, you could implement the trait on the interface on the trait, but you still had to implement it on the class. And it was like, well, what's the point in that?
Yeah. Was that, do you think that was that an implementation detail?
I'm actually not sure. I haven't reviewed this for a while, so I'm actually not sure.
But that seems like a nice progressive RFC, something that can be added.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not really added. It's more finishing off. I mean, we didn't invent traits. They're I've forgotten the language they're from, but anyway.
Scala has traits. I know that a couple other languages do.
That sounds familiar. I've read the white paper that someone showed me the white paper that they were written up in for the language that they were first designed for. And in the white paper, they implemented interfaces. In the white paper, they'd done some other stuff, and it was like core stuff to the idea that was just missed by whoever heard about traits and thought it would be cool to have them in PHP. So this is nice, yeah. But
it's just a gradual improvement over it.
Yeah, but I mean, this is what they're supposed to do. It's one of the things they're meant for. So it's like almost like a finishing touch kind of thing. But yeah, nice if we could move forward with that one.
And one other thing actually, so off air I kind of was speaking, to things we could actually talk about, and something that I'm currently doing a lot, handling Unix process signals. So one thing at work we currently do is like handling long running processes, and you can handle long running processes with PHP quite well, and it's quite efficient to do so. But things such as like using like almost
you shouldn't say that. You shouldn't say that because people hate that. They don't hate that. No, they want to repeat what they've known for years.
That you can't do it in PHP. The PHP for long running processes is a terrible idea. Well,
but it hasn't got a garbage collector. That's one of my favourite ones.
Oh dear. Well, it does work, and it works quite well. Well, we've been using it in production, and it works quite well. So we're using something like Supervisor D. We're actually employing now to handle this. So when you do eventually want to kill that process down, it will cut back up, and you know that you've got these forever running tasks essentially. And one of the things actually is to deal with is cleanup. So killing just a task on its own, say like mid-flow, maybe mid-processing something, is a bad idea. Kill 9 it, you're just saying goodbye. Yeah, you can't handle that. But if you just want to kill it and you want to allow, like say, allow the Unix signaling to say, okay, by the way, you interrupted with the Control C, or you've sig term, you want to terminate that command. Similarly, how you do it in Supervisor, you want to gracefully terminate these and restart them. But one thing I've been playing around with is in PHP is dealing with that. And it deals with it really quite well using the PCNTL extension. There was a couple of things, though, actually interesting about it, kind of like dealing with ticks and things like that. And you were mentioning like how PHP 7 has changed that. And I'm just wondering, like...
You don't mean interesting. I think you mean terrible. Okay, so the way it used to work is in PHP 5 is if you wanted to process signals as... In the manual and in the RFC, we call it asynchronous, but I'm not going to call it that or on demand as possible in PHP. In PHP 5, you had to use ticks, and what ticks done was made the compiler generate extra opcodes for the VM to enter into to check for signals. So this is extremely bad because it makes all code massive. It makes everything much, much bigger. You've got to loop through more code just to get through your statement, and you've got to keep entering into this one handler, even when there's nothing waiting, which is the majority of the time. So this is extremely terrible, and it's a really bad idea to use it in PHP 5. But in PHP 7, for another reason, actually, Dimitri made it so that you could interrupt the VM just by setting a flag in the globals, so that now signals are delivered asynchronously, and I'm using the word correctly, in that they can be delivered to a different thread or a different process in the group. So what happens now is when the signal's delivered, rather than waiting for the next tick that had to have been generated, or the user to call the dispatch function, which is another thing that people used to do rather than using the ticks thing, what it does is just set the flag, and then the next time, when the VM's doing normal looping through instructions, it checks a flag before doing things like going through a loop iteration or making a function call, doing a few other details, and so now eventually you'll get the signal, but there's no need to keep entering into the tick function every other opcode. It used to be every other. I mean, really, really often. So that's actually much better. So that's what we've got now in PHP 7. Signals are quite nice now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, a tick. So what actually is a tick? Because if you look at the documentation, it says a tick is a tickable statement, and then you can attach an event handler to it essentially. So if a tick occurs, you call invoke something.
Well, it's a really loose term actually. In terms of a processor, each tick is as each instruction, each atomic instruction. So each instruction that is not made up of smaller instructions. Okay, that's a tick. But in PHP, we decide what a tick is, and we decide where to output the extra tick opcode. So it isn't every atomic instruction, it's what we decide, and I don't have a list of what we decided was a tick. But it's now irrelevant.
Tickable stuff. So say in PHP 5.6, you'd typically do this where if you want to signal things, you could either, as you say, use the signal dispatch function, which was more efficient because you would only be calling that when you want to. So if you've got domain-specific business logic, all right, while this, okay, actually I care about, I'm at the end of this do-while loop doing something, I can safely exit if I want to. You dispatch that. Or you didn't know, or you want it to be really unperformant, you just set tick to 1. And essentially every tickable statement, so you get these opcodes in, would you? And then it would essentially just kind of pad out your code, the actual opcodes that were created with these ticks in between. That then would go and function call this function every time that would then handle it, or do the signal interrupt and things like that.
Yeah, that's basically it. It like you said there, it basically padded out. It's called instrumentation when you insert instructions just for the purpose of ulterior to the engine execution. So signals and debuggers and things like that. That's how it done it. That's how it instrumented it. It inserted new instructions that you would have to enter into every few instructions, statement or whatever it was, whatever we decided. And yeah, this is really terrible. It's the reason that if you run code with Xdebug but the profile is disabled, it still generates instrumentation instructions even though it doesn't do anything. So that's why your code runs really slowly even when you've got Xdebug loaded but not enabled because of all the extra instructions. It kind of does the same thing, but not quite so extreme. But I mean, it depends on the scale of what you load in, Yeah, that's extremely bad. So we've moved away from that now.
And then, so in PHP 7 now then, to deal with signals, you don't have to declare any ticks at all. You don't have to do any signal dispatch. Am I right in thinking? You just, you could do if you want, but it handles it in a more graceful way. Yeah,
we're calling it asynchronous, but I dislike that because it's not true. But whatever, I mean, we're handling it better, yeah.
One of these things, like with the process signals and stuff, like, we just spoke about it. Like you mentioned, people don't like saying PHP can do long-running tasks and things like that. And
I hate that, yeah.
And are you opposed to, like, do you disagree with them? I'm sure. Like,
I'm sure, yeah. I do, yeah. Yeah, I disagree. It's not true. It's not true that it can't.
I mean, back in the day, it probably was true, maybe.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what's happened. That's what's happened, basically, that all the material out there that's written about it was written at a time when the original material, written by people who knew what they were talking about, because they're the only people who bother to write, usually, or used to, they rightly said that, it doesn't have a garbage collection and this and that, and it's not suitable for this reason and that reason. But then it's just kind of got regurgitated by the next generation and the next generation without anybody actually having the knowledge to go and check whether it's true or not anymore. And it gets reprinted in new articles and in new words, and so people keep hearing it in the same thing in different words, and it's reinforced.
Instead of going back to source to see the root, like, can you actually do it? Yeah.
But it just actually isn't true. It just hasn't been true for like 10 years. It just isn't true.
Do you use it like at your work? Do you use long-running processes in PHP? And
yeah, I mean we've got like tooling not connected to the actual web application that's long-running, and that's PHP. No problem. I mean, there's people that have got that write their whole back end in PHP. They just don't talk about it because they don't want to get slated.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it was actually interesting. There was a guy from Slack. I don't know if you read it. Like, there was an interesting blog post. He said defending PHP. It's like any other language. It's got its pros and cons, but pros it has for dealing with today's web, handling today's problems is a great thing, and it's definitely a viable choice to choose.
People that say bad things about it are honestly usually people that haven't used it.
Yeah.
There are people that do use it and feel so begrudged that they, like that guy who wrote the Fractal of Bad Design article, he was so annoyed that he had to use it that he actually took personal offence. Like, all of the flaws in PHP we had done to offend him.
Yep.
and this is just bizarre. This is very bizarre. If you don't like a tool, you just move on. But if anyone is working in this sector today and doesn't take a serious look at PHP and what it might be able to give them, then they're mad.
Yeah, and they're missing out, aren't they? I think this is the thing, yeah.
They're throwing money away, they're being irresponsible, because I know it's like a cliche, but it is a matter of fact that the world's biggest websites, I mean, this is the only world we know, and the biggest websites on it were written in PHP. As far as we know, that's the biggest websites in the universe were written in PHP. That's actually a true statement. So if you're totally mental, then you'll totally ignore that and just go and carry on with your JSP or your .NET apps or whatever. And they work. But if you haven't looked, then you're not doing yourself justice.
Yeah, don't knock something that you haven't tried. And if you have tried it years ago, it's changed. I think, yeah.
If your opinion is coloured by the PHP of 10 years ago, or the opinion about PHP 10 years ago, without ever having looked at it then either, which is quite a lot of people, then that's mad.
And actually, you brought up an interesting topic about garbage collection, and I don't think I've explained that on the podcast before. I'm just wondering, like, would you mind explaining it for the audience what garbage collection is and how it works?
Well, yeah, okay. Well, each variable, like object or array or whatever, has got a ref count, which represents the number of references that exist in symbol tables to that variable. or whatever structure. You might have it in some custom structure in an extension, but it holds the ref count anyway. Now, sometimes all of the references can disappear. That is, all of the physical references can disappear, but for some reason the ref count has not gone down. This is usually because of a circular reference where to free that memory, you need some process to be able to determine what is actually gone and what is actually still alive. So that's what a garbage collector does. It finds the stuff that should really be free but isn't for some reason, and it frees it so that you can have cyclic references, and you can have, if you don't garbage collect, it seems fine when you're thinking about, well, the process is only going to run for like a minute or whatever, a few seconds or whatever. It's going to use up a bunch of memory, but then it's going to free it because it's going to close down. But then it gets more complicated when we move on to architectures like FPM, where the process doesn't go away.
That's it.
Or Apache in models where the process doesn't go away.
And long-running processes, that's what I just explained,
where the process never goes away. So that's what it is actually for. It's not really necessary for the execution of your script as you most likely see it, but in some circumstances, just where PHP is deployed or where it's used in long-running processes, it makes these things not possible. They'd be probably be possible. You'd have to be really careful and like do unsets everywhere and things like that, and make do explicit things. But yeah, it just makes all that kind of stuff a lot nicer. So that's what the garbage collector does. Frees garbage.
You make an object, it goes on the heap, you have a reference to it. You then pass that to another function, and then for some reason, in that case, then you've now got two references to it, because you've got the function that you've just made it in, and then you've got the function you've just called with it passed into. And then the ref counts automatically go down, decrement, I'm guessing. Once that context of that function goes and it dies, gets destroyed, the ref count goes back down to 1 because you're back in the normal back in the function you started off at.
Yeah, well, it's not automatic because, obviously it's programmed, but yeah, that's the idea, that if you enter a function, you make a new reference, and then when you leave the function table's cleaned up, you lose the reference, or actually, more precisely, the argument stack is cleaned up. You lose the reference to it, but for some reason, maybe something in the function creates more references than you're expecting, or maybe the function crashes, or maybe some other thing happens, and for some reason the ref count doesn't go down. Then you've got garbage because nothing can free it. No matter what, there's no. You're going to have something intervene and detect whether
these cyclic references that cause the problem.
Yeah,
I depend on you, depend on me, and all these kind of things.
And so that's what the garbage collector does. There's actually in the manual, there's a good the theory about how it works is there's a link in the manual.
I'll definitely put that in the show notes.
Yeah, there's a link in the paper in the manual.
And when ref count goes to 0, then, so in a typical use case where you don't have cyclic references, does it get cleaned up already?
Yeah, that's when it's free.
Right. So you don't have to, garbage collection there doesn't occur. It's a garbage collection only is when you have the cyclic references that can't be handled.
Yeah. That's normal ref counting when the ref count goes below 0 and it's free. That's just normal ref counting, yeah.
Because I remember there was obviously a couple of years ago that interesting little, I was able to, make Composer install, poke Composer, do its work quicker because I just disabled the garbage collector. Yeah,
because like I said, well, firstly, that can be extremely complex work that the garbage collector does, computationally heavy.
And that can take a lot of cycles up because it's trying to work out, cleaning it up.
And also that has an effect on your scripts. And a lot of the time, you've got so much memory that you don't really need to keep, you don't really care.
And and you're going to kill it eventually. This is the thing. Like, if it runs for, say, like a couple of, a minute or so, you've probably got enough memory to handle that for it then just to die. But if you are these long-running processes, that's when you have to look after the memory you do have.
It's a bit strange that the default memory setting is like 128 megabytes or something, I think, still.
Yeah.
Nobody's doing that, are they?
No, everyone instantly updates that.
But, so you never really see... it's true that in a normal web app, you won't see the garbage collector entered because it's not needed. It's only when code gets very complicated that you get cyclic references. and a normal web app doesn't really do that. It doesn't have like a really complex hierarchical structure like Composer does, where it's got a load trees and things like
That's
that.
it, of dependencies to work out which ones to use. Yeah,
it's literally that kind of code, that kind of I don't know the word for it, but that kind of code. It's that creates it. It's not your normal web app where you've got references to other objects, but they're normal. They're not cyclic, and it's just normal. So you won't see the garbage collector entered, and it runs for such a short time that you never get anywhere near that needing to occur anyway.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So most people have never seen it actually run. And then when you do see it run, it ruins Composer. But yeah, that's garbage collection.
But in PHP, when did garbage collection actually come about? Like, what is all the hate kind of aimed towards, like PHP 4, when we maybe didn't have garbage collection, and it was these long running processes wouldn't then handle, you wouldn't get garbage collected, and you would just incur so much memory costs.
Yeah, but like, it's not like you can. It's not like this is really solved in any language. You can write today. You can write Java that will leak memory. You can write anything that will leak memory. There's no. I think I'm probably still correct in saying that there's absolutely nothing that can handle every eventuality. And even with the smartest algorithms and the smartest programmers implementing them, there are no perfect
Well,
solutions.
I mean, and also the thing is like, if you make the garbage collector more clever, like the more clever you make the garbage collector, the more processing it takes, the more time it takes. So it's going to incur costs. Like there is a cost to doing these things. You know, garbage collecting is a cost that you have to bear in mind.
I mean, that paper that I mentioned, in the paper they mention a parallel algorithm as well, because they acknowledge that it will often take all of the cycles of a processor to actually of the kind of code that gets so complex that it needs that kind of management for memory. It's obvious that the memory management is going to have to do really hard work. So but we haven't implemented that. We just implemented the synchronous one. But in the paper, it describes how to do it in a parallel way, which is quite interesting to read. But yeah, garbage collection. I mean, in Java, there's a garbage collection thread, and probably in other ones as well, but I don't have knowledge of them. But yeah, it's quite often a thing that you do on a separate thread, but we can't do that. So yeah, that's.
Do you incur, like, obviously you incur that performance hit?
Yeah, we have to, in the same thread as what you're trying to execute code in.
Thanks again, Joe, for coming on the podcast. It's always a pleasure having you on, talking about all these things. It's really interesting, all the work you're doing, with PHP 7.1 at the moment, and, the UI library.
Cool.
All right then, man. Well, yeah, audience, it's been another great episode, and I shall speak to you next week. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
You've been listening to 3 Devs and a Maybe. You can contact us at contact@3devsandamaybe.com or follow us on Twitter at 3 Devs and a Maybe.